Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gemma. The channel is Gemma Books. I hope you're doing really well. So it's the end of July already. So I thought I'd come to you with my very first wrap up. And as with these things, this is literally the worst reading month I've had since the beginning of the year. But I'm going to blame this situation for that. I've spent quite a lot of time trying to figure out how to make a video and how to edit a video and how to upload videos, and less time actually reading. So I've only got 6 books to update you on today. So in the month of July, I've read 6 books. Of those 6, one was a DNF, one was a 2-star, 2 3-stars, 1 4-star and 1 5-star. So I think I'll start at the bottom and work my way up to the rest. So the DNF was The Sympathizer by Viet and Nguyen. If you saw my vlog, which I will link in the description below, you'll see that I just couldn't get on with it. I was listening to it on audio. Even now, I couldn't really tell you what it was about. I listened to about 3 hours of it and I was a bit confused. I didn't really know who any of the characters were. It was told from a main perspective. I don't even know if that character had a name or not. It talked about the sort of mass exodus of American troops from Vietnam following the war, and then it was following that character in America and a character that we know as the general that he was sort of talking to. Yeah, I couldn't follow what was going on. The timeline seemed to flip about. I couldn't really connect to any of the characters because I didn't really understand who any of them were or what they were doing. So in the end, I decided I'm just not enjoying it, so I put it down. Maybe it will be one that I try and go back to if in the future as a physical copy, and read it properly. But at the moment, it's off the list. If anyone thinks that I'm drastically missing out, then please comment below. I could try and persevere a little bit more with it if I'm really missing something magical, but otherwise that one's done. The next book I'm going to talk about is Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. I also listened to this one on audio. It's the second in the Shadow and Bone series. So obviously there's been a lot of hype around this recently because there's a Netflix show. So I was like, oh, I'd quite like to read the series before I watch the Netflix show. My problem is that I struggle to get on with YA fantasy. I love adult fantasy, but I just can't get on with YA. Occasionally I can, but this wasn't one of those occasions. I listened to the first book last month. I gave it 3 stars. It was okay. You follow a young girl called Alina as she discovers that she has these magical powers to summon light. I don't think that's a spoiler. That happens pretty early on in the first one. And then it's about her journey from effectively being a no one to being someone pretty important. So yeah, the first one was fine. I thought, okay, I'll give the first book a bit of a break because, you know, they're setting the scene and that's fine. The second book, I gave 2 stars because there was a chunk of action that happened at the beginning and there was a chunk of action that happened at the end. And I read this towards the beginning of the month, so probably about 3 weeks ago I finished it, 3 weeks ago. Couldn't tell you what happened in the middle. Not entirely sure. Not a lot. So I think it was about 400 pages from looking it up on Goodreads. So for a good 300 pages of the book, nothing happened except Alina whinging. So I understand it's a teenage girl, it's sort of coming of age, but I'm not a teenage girl, and I just felt irritated. I think I have a teenage stepdaughter who I think is more mature than Alina, and it just didn't gel with me. So I won't be continuing the series, which is a shame, but it just wasn't for me. Next up, we will talk about the 3-star reads. So firstly, I would like to talk about this one, How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House by Cherie Jones. So as I said, I gave this 3 stars. This follows a young girl called Lala in a Caribbean island. I don't think it's ever mentioned which Caribbean island, they just refer to it as paradise. And how her life progresses from childhood to a young woman who's married in an abusive relationship and has a child. And then we sort of flip back through the generations. So Lala is raised by her grandmother. So we know pretty early on that her mother has died and that her grandmother has raised her since she was very young. So that multi-generational piece was fantastic. I really liked that, sort of flicking back through the timelines to get snippets from her grandmother's past when she was first married and to her mother's past, obviously when she was alive. It also follows another woman called Mira, who is linked to Lala at the beginning of the story. I won't sort of say how, but her life and Lala's life are linked, and they live quite close together on this beach in paradise, and both are subject to a lot of violence, and it's about how they deal with that. You do get other perspectives in this book as well, which were good. For me, though the subject matter was very hard-hitting, important, I thought well handled. FYI, trigger warnings here for a lot of things, so look that up before you read it if you get triggered. Something about it just didn't hit, and I don't know whether it was because it's actually a relatively short book. It's, let me just check, 312 pages. So I suppose it's standard for a lot of books, but it's on the shorter side, and to cover 2 characters, multiple generations, and have the odd other character thrown in, it just, for me, it wasn't enough time to really connect with where they were coming from and what they were feeling, because obviously they were feeling a lot of things because there was a lot going on, and yeah, so it just slightly missed the mark for me. I did enjoy it. Obviously I gave it 3 stars. That means I thought it was a good book. But it didn't wow me, I suppose. So there were a lot of good things in it. I would certainly read from Cherie Jones again. This was her debut, so I would certainly give her next book a go. But yeah, those were my thoughts on that one. So my next 3-star read was This Lovely City, which I read on my Kindle, by Louise Hare. Again, I did vlog my reading experience of that, so you can see that in the vlog will be linked below. Get your words out, Gemma. So yeah, this one follows 2 perspectives really. That of Laurie, who is a Jamaican man who's come over to England from Jamaica on the Windrush and is trying to find his place in London after obviously all the promises that were made to the Caribbean community about coming here because we needed them to work and and then coming here to find that actually they weren't welcomed with open arms. So we follow his perspective, and he's also a jazz musician, though that doesn't really come into the story too much. And then we follow Evie, who is a 18-year-old mixed race young woman with a white mother and an absent black father. And she is obviously trying to navigate what is effectively a very racist London in the 1950s. And she meets Laurie, and it's about their relationship together. You sort of flash back to things that happened when he first arrived and how they met and some of the things that happened there. And then in the current timeline, there is, I suppose, a crime, a mystery at the centre of it that you're working towards solving. So the premise I thought was fantastic. I read All the Lonely People by Mike Gale, which was sort of similar. It followed a Windrush Jamaican man, but it sort of followed more his current status, but highly recommend that one. So I liked the premise, and I thought it was interesting because I don't know much about that era in time. So it was quite enlightening. However, similar critique to what I gave for Siege and Storm, really. There were just a lot of slow moments in it. For it sort of, something would happen and then it just sort of, and then something would happen and then, and it just, the pacing was off. And then like the last chunk, the last 20-30 pages of the book were fantastic. I felt that it was wrapped up well. I liked the ending, but as I say, it didn't hold my interest all the way through, and so it was 3 stars because there were good points to it, but there were points that I didn't enjoy. So it's sort of a fair to middling. Is a 3-star, fair to middling. So just checking my notes because lacking great manner at my age. So my next one is my 4-star read, which was Take a Hint, Dani Brown. So I listened to this on audio. I listened to the first in the Brown Sisters trilogy by Talia Hibbert last month, Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and I absolutely loved it. Gave it 5 stars. I was literally wetting myself with laughter through the majority of that book. Take a Hint, Dani Brown was also very good, but I didn't laugh as much, which is why I didn't get 5 stars. I know a lot of people prefer it to the first one, but for me, Chloe Brown all the way. So this one follows a young woman named Dani Brown, as you can imagine. She's an independent, intelligent young woman studying for her PhD. She's not had the best of luck in love in the past, so she just sort of has fuck buddies basically, and then it falls into a fake dating trope with a man called Sophia, who, to be fair, sounded very attractive. And yeah, it was enjoyable. I liked listening to it. It just, the character of Sophia for me was too good to be true. There was nothing really wrong with him. He'd had a traumatic experience in his past that he was still struggling with, so there was anxiety rep, which was nice to see. But he was just lovely. Literally, there wasn't a bad bone in his body. And maybe there are people out there like that, but I just think everyone can be a bit of a twat sometimes. So, and he wasn't ever really a twat. So, yeah, it just felt a little bit more unbelievable to me than the first one. And I felt like some of the jokes are sort of regurgitated from the first book a little bit. So it didn't quite hit the same note. But I will still read the third one, the Eve Brown one, at some point. But yeah, 4 stars, very good. Highly recommend the series. But for me, Chloe Brown had the edge. And then we come on to my 5-star read, which was The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. So this one follows a young girl, Lily, who is living in sort of 1960s deep South America. Her mother dies when she's very young and she's raised by her abusive father. And she has effectively I don't know if you call it a nanny, a housekeeper, a black woman who's employed by her father, who basically takes on the role of her mother. One day, Lily and the black mother figure, Rosaline, are in town. Rosaline gets attacked by a group of white men, ends up in prison. Lily breaks her out and they leave the town. They decide, or Lily decides, that she's going to search for answers as to what happened to her mother, what her mother was like when she was younger. And they end up in another small town, and they're taken in by 3 black sisters who have a honey farm. And they live there, and through the relationship that Lily has with these sisters and with Rosaline, she starts to understand what's happened in her past and where her mother came from and how she's ended up where she is. And it was just beautiful. Everything about it was beautiful. It was heartwarming. The whole found family trope is right up my alley. The characters were well done, well fleshed out. There was obviously POC rep in there, but there was also representation for anxiety and depression. Trigger warnings are in there for certain things that I don't want to say because I don't want to spoil, but it just covered so much. It covered mother-daughter relationships, it covered sister relationships, father and daughter relationships, and it was just so well executed. And then on top of that, you have this beautiful layer where they're describing the reality of beekeeping and the things that happen around the bees, and they were linking, Simon Kidd was linking in things that happen to the bees that were irrelevant to what's happening in the story, and it was just so cleverly done. I absolutely loved it. I was not expecting to love it as much as I did, and it just, from about 50 pages in, I knew it's going to be one of my favourite reads of the year. So yeah, absolutely highly recommend that one. Yeah, and so that, I believe, is that. Clearly I have no idea how to wrap up a video because I've just like got to the end of my spiel and I'm like, what do I do now? So yeah, so I hope this has been a good video. I am trying my hardest to get better. And I'm aware of the number of times I've said in this video. I am going to try and edit some of them out, and then I'll probably tally them up just to make myself feel bad. So apologies for that. Big shout out and thank you to everyone who's subscribed so far. As of today, when I'm filming, there's 15 of you. Woohoo! If you've enjoyed this content, please give me a little thumbs up or subscribe if you'd like to. It would mean the world. And I will be back with another video on, I've forgotten what day we're on today, on Saturday. So I look forward to seeing you all then. Okay, bye.